Welcome in to the Wednesday, October 9th edition of the Saints Insider Podcast. I'm Luke Johnson, filling in as your host today. I'm joined by Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan. Guys, we're going to get into a little bit of what we saw in Week 5 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Mainly, we just want to spike the football in Duncan's face for picking the Chiefs. He was the only one, or the Saints against the Chiefs. He was the only one among us. Blind confidence in this team.
I
Jeff.
was regretting that pick about 2 minutes into the game. About the time
you're regretting the pick as soon as you saw the pick?
As soon as I saw the pick, I was like, it's not going to happen. You could see. I would, and early you could see, look, you all were there. I wasn't, so you would know better than me. But I thought maybe the Chiefs might be a little complacent, a little fat and happy. They were into that game. You know, you could see their body language. I was like, I don't think if the Saints are going to win it, they're going to not be. They weren't being overlooked by the Chiefs. So you could see early they were in trouble.
Yeah, I don't think the Chiefs are the type of team that overlook other teams. You've seen them like drop some weird division games in a couple of years, but that happens in division games. And I mean, guys, we won't spend too much time talking about what happened on Monday night, but I think, Rod, it was pretty evident early on that the Saints' continued issues on the offensive line and having guys healthy were kind of going to be a problem in that game.
Yeah, you know, Jeff talked about the interception, and it's like Carr just kind of panicked on him. I mean, he got a little pressure, and I think it was Allen that got knocked back to him. I mean, it was close to him, but Carr just threw it up, and, you know, they kind of got that crowd really going, and the Chiefs hadn't been home in 2 weeks, and it was just kind of a bad start. And once that snowball got rolling, it wasn't going to slow down. So
yeah, and well, the weird part was it was actually like it ended up being a close game in the fourth quarter. The Saints had a chance to make a game of it, but you know, I mean, I just keep coming back to, you know, they were playing a guy at center who'd been with the team for like 3 days. You know, I think Lucas Patrick really struggled. I think the interior generally struggled against that team, and even though it was close, it never really felt like it in that.
Well, yeah, it's because the Chiefs are on the field for a good chunk of the game.
40 plus minutes time of possession.
Right, and so when that happens, I came away from that game actually thinking that the defense is maybe more of a problem for the Saints long term going forward. Like, there's now 2 games where teams have been able to consistently move the ball. Now, I think the Saints deserve credit for their red zone defense, but I don't know if that can hold at this rate over the course of the season, especially if teams are going to be able to move the ball on them like this.
They're giving up a lot more yards after catch this year than normal. I think they give up a lot in that game.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and that's a concern for me. You know, we talk about the age of some of the players on the defense, and that would kind of show up, I think. But it sounds like the MO against that defense right now is to hit these short, you know, pass patterns in space and let your playmakers run with it. And the Saints are really struggling right now in that regard. But that game felt a little, to me, probably the first time this year, like last year, where they stepped up in class against a really good team. And I know they had some injuries, obviously, but they were kind of outclassed in that game, I felt like. And that's the first time I felt that way this year.
And those receivers were like wide open. It just looked like them. And they were just
couldn't tell they were breakdowns or what was going on there.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of last year's Rams game.
Yeah,
for a lot of reasons. But anyways, we'll get into some of the stuff that is concerning. Obviously, there are concerns for this team after dropping its 3rd straight game. We'll do that, but obviously there's some more important stuff to get into, and namely about the quarterbacks. We'll get into all of that right after we take this break from our sponsor.
Nice bike.
Thanks. Can I get it back before Saturday?
That might be tough.
Whoa. Is it just you?
For now, let's take a look.
Can you reach that? How about?
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, welcome back. And, you know, guys, you know, Matt, Rod, us three were traveling back from Kansas City yesterday. For me, it was right about when I was passing Superdome in my car. I'm not sure about you guys, but the word came down. Derek Carr is going to be out for some time. Suffered an injury on his last throw of the game against Kansas City. It was in the fourth quarter, fourth down play. Kansas City sent, I think it was a zero blitz on the play, hit Carr, and he immediately starts grabbing his left side. So it's an oblique injury. The expectation is probably to miss 2 games, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. This is today our Transaction Wire segment, and it is brought to you by Associated Grocers. Join our team and help support the success of local and independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. Fellas, I think this is 6 straight seasons Saints starting quarterback has at least dealt with an injury. I think it'll be the 5th time in the last 6 seasons the starting quarterback has missed time with an injury. Look, I mean, we're all expecting him, I think, to miss at least 2 games. It would put him out for this week against Tampa Bay Buccaneers and next week, which is obviously a short week against the Denver Broncos, maybe putting him in line to return for week, I guess that'd be 8?
Yeah.
Week 8 against the Los Angeles Chargers. And that's still, I think, TBD. So, Rod, I guess we'll start with you and just what were your kind of initial reaction when you heard Carr would miss time? Because we talked about this even before that news came out, talking about how Derek played through injury last year, did not play well through injury. A lot of people were wondering why he didn't take the time that he I think, clearly needed. So when you first heard that he was going to be out, what was kind of your initial take?
It was kind of funny because last year at this time, he got hurt right before the Bucs game too. I remember talking to Jameis Winston, and Jameis was like, kind of thinking that he might get to start. He didn't really want to say it, but he was excited about getting an opportunity to have his first start against the Buccaneers, the team he played for, the team that he suffered the knee injury against. So it kind of reminded me of that, but I guess this time Carr's actually not going to play, it looks like, and I think it's a big blow for this team. This is the team that, last year with Jameis, you kind of felt a little bit more confident just because of all of his experience. But without Jameis, I mean, it's a little dicey, I think, with these 2 guys who just haven't had a lot of NFL experience, or one that hadn't had any NFL experience.
Yeah, and we'll get into both Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler, 2 guys you're talking about who are both of them could potentially start this game. But Jeff, before we do that, I think yesterday we were having a chat about oblique injuries for quarterbacks, and you were here covering Drew when Drew had his own oblique injury. I believe it was a preseason, right? And do you remember some of what he was saying about just navigating that type of injury as a quarterback?
Yeah, it's a real finicky injury. Breeze would get into the whole biomechanics of throwing a ball, and he said it was a critical muscle in your ability to torque and throw, the oblique. I think this one's on Carr's left side, right? Mm-hmm. So,
which just I don't know, intuitively feels like the side you don't want.
Right.
Like your front side, your lead side is the side you don't want to be dealing with something else.
And so what Drew had said, Drew missed, I think, 6 practices in 2 preseason games. And he told me he could have potentially played if it was regular season, but he said it would have been 50-50 and the doctors probably would have made the call. But a year later after that, he said, he didn't say it at the time, but a year later, that he had developed a bunch of bad habits because of that injury. He was compensating. It reminds me a little bit when Aaron Brooks had his labrum injury, and he said the same thing. You're compensating for the injury, and you end up doing a lot of bad things. So I think it's a concern even going forward if Carr does try to rush back like we saw last year playing through it, where he could be at less than 100%. So I think it's a big decision for the organization. Whoever plays in these next 2 games, if they play well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and honestly, I think part of the just crazy bad luck part of this is the timing of this. We're talking about 2 short weeks.
Totally.
So I mean, it's just kind of fluky in that way. Yeah, obviously he's probably going to miss time regardless. But you talk right now. I mean, as we're sitting here right now, they're playing 2 games in the next 8 days. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, what stood out to me is how Carr said it wasn't a pain management issue. That, it wasn't about, hey, this is so painful I can't play. He's like, I literally can't do what I want to do, which is, if we're talking about torque and throwing passes, he can't turn his body enough to pass, and so that's going to take some time to heal, and we'll see. But I mean, we already talked so much about this part of the schedule going into the season and what it meant, and they're here now, and on a 3-game losing streak, starting a rookie quarterback or quarterback with no professional starts, and it's not looking great.
And they're doing it against two defenses that you probably. I mean, look, yeah, you don't want to be in this situation regardless, but like these are probably not the defenses you want to be going up against. Denver Broncos have been one of the best defenses in the NFL this season, period. And specifically when it comes to getting after the passer, they have a very aggressive pass rush. And then you look at Tampa Bay, and while their numbers haven't been great, they have been carved up by some teams. Todd Bowles is a coach who likes to throw a lot of pressure at quarterbacks, likes to throw a lot of pressure at rookie quarterbacks. I think they've sent the third most blitzes in the NFL this year. They're top 10 in the amount of times they're sending pressures at quarterbacks. So, I mean, this is going to be a challenge for two young guys who combined have 21 NFL snaps.
And I think a very maybe underrated or overlooked aspect of this is there's no Eric McCoy there to kind of be the safety blanket for a young quarterback who could normally maybe set the protections and all the things that Eric McCoy does. He's gone. So, I mean, it just exacerbates the situation so much. And I think it's important to see if Antoine Winfield plays this week because, I mean, that guy is, in my opinion, the best player in the whole division. And he's an all-pro and big-time ball hawk playmaker who is excellent at disguising things on the back end. He hasn't played in a few weeks, so that would help the Saints if he doesn't play.
All right, guys, that was brought to you by Associated Grocers. Associated Grocers is hiring. If you're looking to join a team dedicated to supporting independent grocers, apply today. Your future starts here. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get back, and we're going to talk a little bit about Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler, pros and cons, and who we would start in this situation. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Guys, I just want to remind you that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net, member FDIC, equal housing lender. All right, guys, so we don't know exactly who the starting quarterback is going to be for this Week 6 game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jake Haener has ostensibly been the number 2 quarterback this year, which is not necessarily surprising. He's had a year more of NFL experience than Spencer Rattler has. I think if you're looking at a quarterback who is going to come in mid-game and make sure everything stays stable, I think he's kind of the logical choice for that. But that, I think, kind of gets thrown out the window this week. When you're looking at who can they build a game plan around. So we're going to talk about both Haener and Spencer Rattler, Rattler being the quarterback they drafted in the 5th round this year, pros and cons of each one. We'll start with Jake Haener. Rod, when you're looking at him, and you've seen a lot of him in training camp, you've seen a little bit of him in games, what in your mind are his strengths and what could be his weaknesses that Tampa Bay could exploit?
I think the strengths would be, first of all, I think I saw him make some steps from last year to this year. I thought last year he kind of struggled, and you didn't want to. I wasn't confident that he's a guy you could throw out there. Now I feel a little bit more confident that you can throw him out there. I don't know if he can go out there and win you a game. I think he can go out there and game manage you to a win maybe, but I think he can throw the ball well. I think I don't know if obviously he's not as mobile as Spencer, so I think that might be something that would be a concern, especially behind this offensive line. So, but you asked for the pros, right?
The pros and cons.
Yeah, for me, the pros would just be that he's made that leap. He has a little bit more experience, not a lot, not enough to probably make a difference. But I think that would probably be it for me, just the experience he has.
And maybe the word you'll hear from Dennis Allen this week, I'm sure, is moxie.
Yeah,
a little bit of that too. We see that in training camp practices. He does do a lot of smack talking. Kind of fun to watch him do that. I think for me, when I'm looking at Haener, and I'm curious if you guys agree, the thing that stands out about him is his processing. He's clearly not the most gifted player in the world. I think he's a lot more talented than people give him credit for, because they just kind of look at him as small quarterback, not this like crazy eye-popping arm strength, but he's got enough skill to play in the NFL. I think the thing to me though is his ability to see the defense, to get the ball out on time where it's supposed to go, and accurately. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
I would agree with that, and he talked very much in the offseason about how this offensive system better suits his strengths, that how the last system was so built in with Drew Brees that it was really hard to kind of step into that system as a rookie. Well, they've all kind of learned this new system from day one. I think we really saw, especially in like training camp, that he just was confident of where to go with the ball. I do think the worrying thing is there just does seem to be a big discrepancy with how Jake Haener performs in practice versus the games. But, I mean, if he can translate to the type of player he is in practice, like I think the most impressive thing we saw this summer as regards to Jake Haener was just the way he was able to lead 2-minute drills. Like, they were really money in those situations, but we just haven't really, like, when they needed a score in Kansas City after Carr went out, I mean, they just were so overwhelmed that I don't really think that's Jake Haener's fault, but they just haven't really been able to have any sort of production when he's been in there for the first 3 outings.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, though. I do think this system, one of the strengths of it is it always seems to have an answer for everything the defense throws at you. And so if you're a quarterback that just follows those rules, you're going to be able to execute to some degree. And I think that's what kind of Jake Haener's made to do. He's this really smart kid who knows offenses really well. So maybe with a week of preparation, you get thrown out there against the defending Super Bowl champs, and I mean that's a tough situation. They're turning back their ears, coming after you. They got a lead. I think he could maybe perform better with a week under his belt. But the thing I've always liked about him that you alluded to, Luke, is, I mean, he clearly has confidence. I mean, he does not lack confidence.
Not
actually,
even remotely.
Yeah, I thought he made some pretty good passes. I think they got away with a pass interference against, was it Shaheed, on one of those plays. I mean, it looked like the officials were just trying to get out of there at that point of the game. But he didn't look scared in that moment, which is something you like to see. And I think he would relish a chance to play in a game like this. But, it's a tall task, no matter what, especially with the offensive line issues.
I mean, I think there is a little bit. Matt's right. The overall performance, preseason games, regular season games, whatever, is not matched the practice performance. But I do think that you could probably throw out the stat line from Monday night's game when he's coming in fourth quarter. Chiefs are protecting a 2-score lead, and they know what's coming.
Right.
He went, I think, 2 for 7 in that game. The couple scrambles, that stuff doesn't matter to me as much. But it is a concern that we haven't seen the carryover from practice, where he's been very good at times. At times he was their best quarterback in training camp, to the games. Haven't seen it in preseason, haven't seen it in the regular season. So I think we're all probably in agreement that if we're looking just at like maybe the safest option, Jake Haener?
Probably, yeah. Probably knows the scheme.
Highest floor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was the number 2 quarterback for a reason. We don't know. I mean, that was for whatever reason, Dennis Allen made him the number 2 guy. So,
right.
Yeah.
Also, in terms of just like draft status, I mean, he was picked around higher than Rattler. I know that doesn't matter much now, but it just goes like to show a little bit. Like, I think that kind of gets lost when talking about Rattler, because people think of Rattler as a potential, at one time in his college career, he was regarded as a top 5 pick, and he fell to the 5th round. So it's like, oh my God, we got this amazing steal. Well, it's like, well, Haener did go around above him. Like, I know they were a year apart, but I think it's interesting. Like the perception is could be much different when you're actually talking, but that's just not the perception between those two quarterbacks is wildly different.
Well, I think part of that too is that Rattler came out in what was considered to be a very good draft class for quarterbacks. Had how many went in the first round?
I think 4.
5?
Maybe 5.
5?
Maybe 5, yeah.
Went Williams, Daniels, May, Penix, McCarthy, Nix. So 6 quarterbacks went in the first round of this year's class. I don't remember what the number was for 2023, but I think Haener was generally regarded as a mid-round pick, somebody who maybe could go off the board in the 3rd round, maybe somewhere day 3. With Rattler, I think there was a lot more boom or bust with him going into the draft. Some people considered him maybe potentially a late first-round pick, depending on how some of the draft shaked out. A lot of people thought of him as maybe a day 2 pick. He fell to the Saints in the 5th round. I think everybody immediately after the pick happened, they were like, okay, there's potential for that to be a steal. Obviously, he's still a 5th-round pick. But I think that to me is where maybe some of that discrepancy comes from. But we're going to talk about this with Rattler. I mean, he is. I think the pros are really evident with him. Super talented individual. One of those guys who scouts notebooks, can make all the throws, whatever that means. But the ball does look different coming from his arm. He's got a very loose live arm. He's one of those guys who can kind of throw creatively off of multiple platforms. He has a little bit of that, I'm not saying he's Mahomes, but a little bit of that to his game, right? So I think let's just start there with him. When you're looking at the upside for him, well, what does that look like for you, Rod?
I mean, it goes back to his high school days. He was the best quarterback in the country.
Yeah, I think he was number 1 quarterback in his class, or yeah.
Number 1 quarterback in his class. There were a lot of Baker Mayfield comparisons going into the draft this year. So I mean, I think the potential is there. You've seen him play he played in the SEC and in the Big 12.
Big 12.
Originally, yeah. I had to remember which one it was. But, so, I mean, I think he's had some of that big game. Just more people know him, and you know the name. And I think that's why fans have kind of bought in on him already. And the potential, I mean, the upside is there. And I think that's what people are kind of counting on. They want to see that. And we've seen flashes of it, every now and then he make a play, and people are just excited about that. And, I mean, this is a fan base that's starving for a quarterback anyway. So this is the kind of guy that this is who the Saints fans want to see.
I don't think there's any question about that. Yeah. Okay, but what's the downside?
To me, the biggest downside is if you start him, that means you've basically demoted Haener. And if he doesn't work out, then you're going to end up going back to Haener, and it's just, I don't know. I just think it's kind of it could be really bad if he doesn't play well.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of potential for that.
Yeah, I mean,
he's got a lot of upside. He's got a lot of talent. I don't think any of us are doubting that. But I think to me the reason he's the number 3 going into the season is because watching him throughout training camp, they clearly needed to develop that talent and coax more of that talent out to where it was more consistent with him. I mean, I remember, Matt, we were in, I guess it was OTAs or even rookie minicamp, and it was like an interception a day. Often he was late on his throws, on his reads, and he had some really tough moments. And look, to his credit, he bounced back. He played really well at times during the preseason, really well at times during training camp, and you could see a path there for him to be a capable, quality NFL starting quarterback. But at the same time, you could see some of the warts in his game.
Yeah, and I actually think that improvement from OTAs to training camp is maybe one of the reasons to start him, is just his rapid improvement in that area. He is a college quarterback. I can't remember how many starts he's had.
42 career starts. I think Haener had 29 in college.
Right, and so I think he's clearly experienced there. I think he could step into the situation. I think he is a little raw in some areas. I think that the number one thing the best argument I could make if you say, hey, why should Spencer Rattler start, is in college he dealt with so many different offensive lines and was sacked so many times and was under pressure constantly, and it didn't really faze him. He was still able to bounce back, and he was still able to lead a productive offense. And if you look at the Saints offensive line right now, and it's not going to be easy for whoever steps in there. And so I just think, like, there's that report out there from the NFL Network that he's a strong candidate to start. And I think that's why, is because he can thrive in chaotic situations.
I think that's the number one reason, is that he's so mobile, and you need it. As we saw with Carr, he was under the gun, and maybe with a week's time, Clint Kubiak and his staff can fashion a game plan that's built around those strengths. You know, let's face it, it's not going to be the same game plan they had for Derek Carr. So I think it makes a lot of sense because of his mobility, like you said, and he is. We saw that in preseason. I mean, he scrambled for first downs a few times, used his mobility, and that's kind of the way the league's going right now. I think that's part of the reason so many fans are excited about him, because he has dual threat capability. I mean, he's a true drop back passer, but he definitely, I'd say of the three, he's probably the most mobile quarterback of the three.
I think it's a slight edge for him over Haener.
Yeah, and Haener's mobile too. Yeah,
I think his mobility is more like, it kind of reminds me, he's smaller. Kind of reminds me of like younger Aaron Rodgers, where he'd kind of escape and he would hurt you every now and then with scrambles. He's not a guy like he's not like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or any of these like true dual threat guys in the NFL who are really going to rack up 60, 70 yards rushing a game if they want to. But I do think he's somebody who can stress a defense with his legs.
I think the downside is kind of what we were alluding to earlier, that this team's lost 3 in a row. You have a head coach that's under the gun, who knows he's under pressure to win, and if he throws a rookie out there and it's a disaster, and you're 2-4, and the team you're losing to now has a 2-game lead on you, and you still have to go to their play. I mean, like, this is a huge game. Yep. You need to win it, so you're really looking at, I think Rattler, you make the case long-term, is probably for sure the best answer, but we're talking about short-term here. You're going to have Carr back in a couple weeks. That's the decision-making that has to be going on at Airline Drive.
We're going to get to that right now. Okay, so let's put yourself in the Saints decision-makers' heads here. We're going to go with who you would start and why. And I'm actually going to start this off. I think I would start Rattler in this situation. And my reasoning for that is it's kind of alluded to, kind of going back to what you were saying, Rod. Haener is a guy you can win with, and I think Rattler has a lot more potential of being the guy you win because of. I think the ceiling is much higher for what he can bring you, and while Haener's floor is higher, I think they might be in a position just because of all the stuff they're dealing with, because of the fact that their run game hasn't gotten going. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, and I doubt it's going to get going this weekend against Tampa Bay. Just considering what they're going to do to load up against that with a rookie or first-time starter under center. I think that Haener, or Rattler rather, gives you a lot more stuff you can do within the offense. Maybe not like from an understanding of the playbook point of view, and maybe not in terms of like getting the ball out on time, like we were talking about as a strength of Haener's. But I think those go balls to Shaheed and Olave are going to be in the playbook. I think there's going to be a lot more ability to throw the ball downfield and deal with pressure if you've got Spencer Rattler in there. So that's, if you've got an entire week to game plan around his strengths, I think his strengths are, to me, a little bit more compelling than Jake Haener's. I kind of want to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, for me, I think Rattler does give you the best chance to win. But I still go back to, why was Haener the number 2 guy? Like, was there something that they saw that just gave him that edge? And for me, that may be enough to start Haener. But, I mean, with this being the Bucs, if they were playing somebody else this week, I might go with Haener. But I do think Rattler's probably your guy to give you the best chance to win the game. And this game is too important to just, you can't concede a game. This is a division game that you really need to win. So I think I'd probably go with Rattler here. But there is that concern for me that if it doesn't work out, then you got to go back to Haener, and then I think you just get you're going to have some morale issues at that point, I feel like.
Yeah, I think this is just whatever it is, you're going to have to stick with it.
Right.
And I'm glad you brought up the thing with Haener being the game day number 2, because that kind of reminds me of the 2020 season when Drew went down. I think it was against the San Francisco 49ers midway through the game, and they brought Jameis in for the second half. And Jameis played pretty well. I think it's like 7 for 11 for a touchdown in the game, something like that. But then the very next week, when they had an opportunity to game plan, they went with Taysom Hill as a starter, and he started, I think, the next 5 games.
Yeah. Same situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously it's a little bit different because Taysom had the game day role, so making him the number 2 on game day when he's already in the game plan for playing tight end and receiver and running back and all that stuff, like that matters. But I do think that there's part of it where, like, when you're running the game plan that is supposed to be for Derek Carr, Jake Haener makes the most sense to be your number 2 quarterback. But when you have an opportunity to game plan for an entire week for a guy's specific skill set, I do think that opens the door for Rattler, and that's why we're talking about him. All right, Matt, who would you go with?
Yeah, I'd go with Rattler. I just think the upside is there. Haener, I think, could, like, if Tampa Bay is going to blitz so much, it actually made me think he could be the safer option if he's able to diagnose that better than Rattler. But I just think the mobility and the offensive line is just, like, such a huge concern at this point that I think Rattler is the better quarterback equipped to handle that situation than, say, Haener is.
For probably the next 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, and look, I think the Saints would know, obviously, better than any of us what they've seen from Rattler in practice, what they feel like they've got. They probably have a pretty good feel for him right now, but no one's really going to know till you throw him out there in a game. I mean, it's just a whole different world than what we've seen in preseason. I mean, vanilla defenses, guys bagging groceries on the field. Now you're getting the real deal. So it could go one way or the other. I mean, some guys are just gamers, and this kid might be another Brock Purdy. Who knows? I mean, I'm not saying he is, but you don't know until you get him out there. And I think it reminds me a little bit of, like, the stories you heard about Tom Brady when he was excelling in practice for a year and a half, and so they really were high on him. So when Bledsoe went down, they had no qualms with putting him out there, and then he excelled even beyond their expectations. Same thing, I think, with Patrick Mahomes. I'm not comparing him to those are 2 of the greatest quarterbacks ever, but the point is they knew what they had. And so I think the Saints, if they start Rattler, which I think they are going to start Rattler, I think it's because they've seen a lot to give them confidence that this guy can actually get the job done. And they've got a week or a few days, I should say, to fashion a game plan, like Luke said, around what he does best and give him confidence. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to pare it down to what he feels really confident in and, see what he can do under the lights once these bullets start flying.
Okay, so that's all who we think they should start. Rapid fire, who do you think they will start?
Haener.
Rattler.
I go Rattler just because of the NFL Network report. I don't think that gets leaked.
Right.
It's not. Yeah, I don't even think I'd be considering Rattler to start if that report hadn't got out there.
I would. You would.
I don't think I would.
Let me just double down here on my Clancy's bet. If Jake Haener starts, I'm buying you all 2 meals at Clancy's.
But if you didn't hear a report yesterday, would we even be having this discussion, you think?
Yes.
No, I think we can't. So. I think we were all coming here like
I would have.
Once again, Rappaport said.
No, I'm saying take that out.
A strong consideration. They didn't say like will be considered.
It was a
strong candidate.
No, I'm saying if you didn't hear that yesterday at all, what would you be saying today?
So it's
yeah, no,
but I'm saying I think that factors into why we're having this discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yes, it does. It obviously does. But, like, I do think that that we would be, because, I mean, even going into the season, Dennis Allen is not saying, like, who his number 2 is. And obviously there's the, Rattler's been the inactive emergency third quarterback, and Haener has therefore been the guy. But, like, I don't think that much matters when you're taking the starting quarterback out of the equation. Because I do think that there's a difference between putting a guy in there to run the game plan that the starting quarterback was supposed to run versus the guy who is going to be starting the game.
Do you all think there's anything to the decision of the cult following that Spencer Rattler's had. That they didn't want, that they didn't want to deal with that. That if you have Haener as the backup, you don't have to. If Carr's having a bad game, everybody's calling for Rattler.
Yeah,
whereas if Haener's there, you don't.
If that's part of the decision making, they don't need to be making those decisions.
100% agree. I've heard that speculation, which I don't think DA's making that decision.
I don't think so.
Right. If those reports hadn't come out yesterday, though, we'd probably be up here discussing who should be the starter. But I don't think we would be trying to figure out which one it's going to be. I think we would all be assuming that Haener was going to start.
I don't know, man.
Oh, no, I wouldn't have thought that. No, I definitely would have thought it was 50-50. But I feel 100% sure it's going to be Rattler after that report.
Right. Yeah.
We know how the game works.
Right.
We know how this game works. Those guys don't throw that out there. First they report Carr is going to be out, and then literally right on the heels of that, he's a strong that's coming from inside the building, and they're cagily trying to keep it a little vague to protect their sources. That's how the game works.
Well, just note for the record, my Haener pick was just because I'm just pretending those reports weren't out there. I'm just basing it on what I would have said.
Double down on Clancy's. Clancy's will go next week.
Yeah, okay.
I will. I do want to say if Haener does start, I don't think there should be an uproar of, oh my God, how could they pass up Rattler?
Totally agree.
Give Haener a chance.
Haener's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if Haener starts and they win the game, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
I think both these guys can win this game.
But that said, I think Rattler's going to start.
Also, I just want to point out you can't double down on your Clancy's bet if you've never actually followed through on your Clancy's bet in the first place, my guy.
Doubling down.
No, that's not doubling down. That's just making a second bet that you're not going to follow through on.
Still waiting for video evidence.
All right. Look, the fact of the matter is that no matter who starts at quarterback, they're dealing with some issues on this team, and it's going to make it challenging for them no matter what. And it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the field because they haven't been able to get a run game going. They're down to their fifth center. They looked really out of sorts in the offensive line. Their defense, while I think maybe it's still better than some of y'all think, they're giving up way too many explosives, way too many yards. They're having a hard time getting off the field in certain situations. So let's just really quickly dial into this. And I guess for you, Rod, what's the most concerning thing that you've seen in this 3-game losing streak that's really just kind of taken the wind out of the sails after that great 2-0 start?
I think for me it'd be just the lack of being able to run the ball, but which goes back to the offensive line. It's all connected. For me, outside of the red zone defense, I don't think there's a lot of good things going on with this team right now. So for me, it's the running game. I just think they've been really bad.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And look, when we saw this offense putting up 91 points the first 2 weeks, they were averaging 185 rushing yards per game. They were ripping off huge chunks of yards. They were in great third down situations, which you saw their third down numbers were great. Their red zone numbers were great. Everything was great. And in the 3 losses, and maybe with the exception of Atlanta, they ran the ball decently well in that game. But when you've seen that run game get taken away, it eliminates everything they want to do on offense. They ran 4 play-action passes this past week out of 35 or 36 dropbacks. That is easily their lowest rate of the season, and that's their bread and butter. That's what they want to build everything off of. So if they can't, because of their offensive line, if they can't run the ball, it makes everything else harder on the offense. What about you guys?
Yeah, I would say the interior of the offensive line rather than just the run game. I think the interior is the reason the run game isn't working right now. I think when they just have standard drop back passing, the pocket collapses so fast because those guys on the inside just cannot hold their own, and it leads to just poor decisions like you saw with Derek Carr over his interception. That pocket was gone in 2 seconds. That's preventing this team right now from looking functional on offense. Though I will say the defense, like I said before, I think that is worrisome as well.
I feel like the defense in that game, I don't know, man. I'm giving them a pass in that game. I think Mahomes is such an elite player, and he's kind of the perfect quarterback to kill the Saints, right? He's a great passer, but he's also extremely mobile and has great ability to buy time. And there's not anybody else really quite like him in the league. So I kind of give them a pass in that game. They also they look a little intimidated for the first time I've seen them. Like they just kind of looked out of sorts and didn't look as confident as they normally are. They're a very confident, kind of swaggery defense, and they didn't seem to have it in that game. And so I'm giving them a pass in that game. So I think that's still an elite defensive secondary. There's no doubt they're still playing at a high level. The running defense is a little troublesome without some of the linebacker play. I mean, I thought the young guys, Andy Reid exposed those guys, especially in coverage, and that's worrisome going forward if we don't see Werner and Gay out there. But Matt's hit the nail on the head. I mean, and Rod, I mean, if they can't run the ball, everything on offense starts there, and it just all kind of domino effects. At least with Derek Carr at quarterback now, everything's different with one of these young guys. I don't know how they're going to perform, but we know that Clint Kubiak and this scheme were brought in by Dennis Allen and the Saints Brain Trust because of their ability to run the ball and basically protect Derek Carr in the passing attack. That's what they wanted this whole scheme to do, and they can't do it right now with these injuries in the interior.
Well, we'll see this week what their injury situation looks like. They won't get Shane Lemieux back. Obviously, the team put him on IR earlier this week, but they might get Cesar Ruiz back. We'll see, and that would be a help. It would eliminate at least some of the shuffling in there, and you'd only be down at that point one out of your initial opening day starting five. But I'm with you on that. The interior has been a really big problem. So we'll see. Weirdly enough, I think both tackles have been pretty solid.
Yeah.
Trevor Penning's been solid.
Fuaga had probably his biggest struggle last game.
He did,
Yeah,
but I mean,
okay.
I think over 5 weeks he's been pretty good, and
That's a good team they were playing.
It's true, and the tackles were a big concern coming in. I think they've played pretty well, but the interior obviously needs to get a lot better. Defensively, I'm with you on the linebackers. It's two straight weeks now they've had to have somebody in there they don't really want to have in there. DeMario Davis, when he misses game, Willie Gay starts, and everything's going great for a series. He's out after like 6 plays. Last week, Pete Werner injures his hamstring on Friday before the game. He can't go, and you've got Anthony Orji and DeMarco Jackson out there. I think they're promising young players, but they're not ready for that situation yet.
And I didn't think DeMario had one of his better games. I think it's clear he's probably not 100%.
Yeah.
He did not play that well.
Yeah.
And
I think the defensive plan wasn't great against Kansas City either. It looked like they were just trying to limit the explosives over the top, and just gave Mahomes was just carving him up underneath the entire game.
Yeah,
so,
I think they got completely outcoached in that game.
I agree,
scheme wise.
All right, I think that's going to do it for today, guys. Saints will be back out there at practice today. They changed their schedule a little bit. They are practicing later today, so make sure you're out there looking for updates this evening and early afternoon. We will be back here on Friday to preview the Saints game against the Buccaneers. Zach will be back in the host seat for that, so you won't have to hear me rousel, whatever the word is.
You sound still a little dejected by the Brewers. You sound
come on, man. Come on. All right. So we will be back Friday. Let's cut that part out about Jeff talking smack about my team. For Rod Walker, I'm Luke Johnson, Matthew Paris, Jeff Duncan. We've got Norman Bell behind the glass. Make sure you look for all of our coverage over at NOLA.com, and we will catch you all Friday.